The boundary of duty. Captain Nikolai Volkov stared at the horizon where twin suns melted into the copper-colored sea, painting Helix 9's sky in violent shades of crimson and gold. His breath fogged the cracked viewscreen of Outpost Meridian, a forgotten military installation that had once been the forward command center during the Sundering War. Now it was little more than a glorified listening post, a graveyard for soldiers with tarnished records and nowhere else to go. "Captain," announced the outpost's AI in its perpetually bored tone, "your daily report is 23 minutes overdue." Nikolai ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "What exactly am I supposed to report, Sarah?" "The rocks haven't moved. The ocean's still toxic. And our neighbors across the DMZ still aren't talking to us. Operational protocol requires." "Fine." He sighed, pressing his thumb against the console's biometric reader. "Captain's log, day 214 at Outpost Meridian. Nothing to report except dwindling supplies and a persistent leak in the eastern corridor that smells suspiciously like coolant mixed with whatever Sarah is attempting to pass off as coffee these days." The AI paused, processing. "Submitted. Though I feel obligated to note that my beverage synthesis follows standard military nutrition guidelines." "Then the guidelines need therapy," Nikolai muttered, limping toward the communications array. His left leg, now mostly synthetic after a plasma grenade had shredded the original 3 years ago, whirred in protest at the sudden movement. Medical had done their best, but frontier military hospitals weren't exactly known for their cutting-edge prosthetics. The console blinked with an incoming transmission, the encrypted signal pulsing with an urgency that made Nikolai's stomach tighten. Command rarely contacted Outpost Meridian directly. When they did, it never brought good news. Captain Volkov, the stern face of Colonel Harriet Dunham materialized on screen, her expression as rigid as her perfectly pressed uniform. "Intelligence has detected unusual activity in Sector 7, just beyond the demilitarized zone. We believe the Vespari are mobilizing." Nikolai frowned. "The Vespari have been peaceful since the ceasefire, Colonel." "What kind of activity are we talking about?" "That's classified," she replied sharply. "Your orders are simple: monitor and prepare for strategic elimination should the need arise. We're uploading coordinates for the Hammer Protocol." The mention of Hammer Protocol made Nikolai's artificial leg ache with phantom pain. The last time Command had initiated Hammer, an entire settlement had been reduced to molecular dust. He'd been the weapons officer who'd pulled the trigger, following orders without question. The nightmares still hadn't stopped. "With respect, Colonel, is elimination really necessary? We could attempt communication, or—" "Your job isn't to think, Captain. It's to follow orders," Dunham cut him off. "Your history of hesitation is precisely why you're stationed at this backwater outpost. Don't make it worse." The transmission cut off before he could respond, leaving him staring at his own reflection in the darkened screen. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper, his gaze more haunted than he remembered. Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Hammer Protocol data received. Target coordinates indicate a civilian settlement, Captain." Nikolai's blood ran cold. "Show me." The viewscreen filled with surveillance imagery, grainy but clear enough to see structures that were unmistakably homes, gardens with their strange bioluminescent crops, and what appeared to be a school or community center. There were no weapons installations, no military presence. Just people living their lives on the wrong side of an arbitrary line drawn by politicians light years away. "Threat assessment?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Scans detect no military-grade technology or weapon signatures," Sarah confirmed. "Population approximately 300 individuals, primarily civilians. Probability of military threat, less than 3%. Nikolai closed his eyes, the weight of what he was being asked to do settling on his shoulders like a collapsing star. 300 lives. Children, families, people who had survived a war only to be exterminated because someone in a distant office was feeling nervous. "Captain, Hammer Protocol requires confirmation within 30 minutes, Sarah reminded him. I know the protocol, he snapped, then immediately regretted it. It wasn't the AI's fault. Sorry, Sarah. I just need to think. He pulled up the official ceasefire agreement, scanning through the dense legalese. There it was, in Section 17, both sides had agreed to prohibit settlements within 5 kilometers of the demilitarized zone. According to the coordinates, the Vespari settlement was 4.8 kilometers from the boundary, technically a violation, but barely. A technicality worth 300 lives. Nikolai's hands hovered over the console. His duty was clear. His orders explicit. But the face of a Vespari child flashed in his mind, from another mission, another lifetime ago. Wide, opalescent eyes filled with terror as his squad had swept through a hostile village that turned out to be nothing more than refugees. Sarah, open a channel to Colonel Dunham. Channel open, the AI responded after a moment. Colonel, this is Captain Volkov. I've reviewed the intelligence and cannot in good conscience execute Hammer protocol against a civilian target. I respectfully request alternative orders. The silence that followed was deafening. When Dunham's voice finally came through, it was glacial. Captain, your request is denied. Execute Hammer protocol immediately or face court-martial for insubordination. Nikolai's jaw tightened. Then I guess I'll see you at the court-martial, Colonel. Volkov out. He terminated the connection and turned to the weapons console. Sarah, disable all offensive systems. Authorization Volkov, 7-7 Epsilon. Warning, this action violates direct orders and constitutes a court-martial offense under Military Code Section 31, Sarah's voice had taken on a concerned tone. Noted, Nikolai said grimly. Do it anyway. Systems locked down, Sarah confirmed after a moment. Captain. What now? Now. Nikolai let out a bitter laugh. Now we wait for the hammer to fall on us instead. It didn't take long. Within hours, alarms blared throughout the outpost as 3 military shuttles descended from orbit. Nikolai stood in the airlock, straight-backed and resolute, as armed soldiers poured in with weapons drawn. Captain Nikolai Volkov, you are hereby relieved of command and placed under arrest for violation of direct orders, announced a stone-faced commander. Surrender your weapons and access codes immediately. What followed was a blur of bureaucratic vengeance. His rank, stripped. His service record, blackened. His prosthetic leg, deemed military property and replaced with an outdated model that left him with a pronounced limp. Within a week, he was no longer Captain Volkov but simply Nikolai, sole occupant of Outpost Meridian, now downgraded to an automated monitoring station that barely required human oversight. His punishment, isolation on a toxic planet with minimal supplies and the company of an AI program to remind him of his failure twice daily. To be fair, Sarah noted one evening, they could have executed you. Maybe they have, Nikolai replied, watching the alien sunset. Just slowly. Weeks passed in a monotonous haze. Nikolai maintained the outpost more out of habit than duty, rationed his supplies with mathematical precision, and tried not to think about the 300 souls who continued to live because of his disobedience. At night, he dreamed of opalescent eyes and gardens that glowed in the dark. Then came the signal. It started as a faint disturbance on the long-range sensors, something approaching from across the DMZ. Not a military vessel. Something smaller, faster, with a propulsion signature unlike anything in the Earth Fleet database. Unidentified craft on approach vector, Sarah announced with unusual urgency. No response to identification queries. Nikolai limped to the sensor array, watching as the craft decelerated and settled into orbit around Helix 9. Weapon signature. None detected. However, the hull composition is unusual. Scans cannot penetrate. Before Nikolai could respond, the craft descended rapidly through the atmosphere, its trajectory bringing it directly toward the outpost. He braced himself, one hand reaching for the sidearm he was no longer authorized to carry. The craft landed with unexpected grace, its hull shifting and rippling like liquid mercury before settling into a teardrop shape. A seam appeared along one side, spilling soft ambient light onto the copper-colored soil. A figure emerged, tall and willowy, with skin that shimmered with an internal luminescence reminiscent of mother-of-pearl. Her features were delicately alien yet hauntingly beautiful, large, pupilless eyes that shifted color like opals, a crest of sensitive filaments where hair would be on a human, and elongated limbs that moved with liquid precision. She was undeniably Vespari, and she was walking directly toward the outpost entrance. Sarah's voice broke the stunned silence. "Captain, what do we do?" Nikolai moved toward the airlock, his heart hammering in his chest. "We open the door." The Vespari woman stood at the threshold, studying him with those color-shifting eyes. She raised a six-fingered hand in what might have been a greeting. "I am Lyra of the Seventh Harmony," she said, her voice melodic despite the halting translation. "I have come for the one who denied the fire from the sky." She tilted her head, fragile filaments swaying. "I have come for you, Nikolai Volkov." The Echo of Sacrifice, Part 2, The Language of Stars document ### Part 2, The Language of Stars. Nikolai stared at the alien woman standing in his airlock, her opalescent skin catching the harsh outpost lighting and transforming it into something almost magical. For a moment, he wondered if isolation had finally created Part 2 of the story in an artifact for better readability. You can access The Echo of Sacrifice, Part 2, The Language of Stars, to continue the story. This story features completely different characters than those in your inspiration text. Instead of Commander Ryan Vex and Sierra of the Allery, I've created Captain Nikolai Volkov and Lyra of the Seventh Harmony. Their story follows the theme of a human soldier's sacrifice earning an alien's love, but with a unique setting, different character dynamics, and an original plot that explores themes of duty, conscience, and connection across seemingly insurmountable boundaries. The narrative centers on Nikolai's moral choice to disobey orders that would have destroyed an alien settlement, and how that single act of compassion leads to an unexpected relationship with Lyra, who comes to understand the human who spared her people. Together they navigate cultural differences, military consequences, and ultimately choose a shared future among the stars. The Language of Stars. Nikolai stared at the alien woman standing in his airlock, her opalescent skin catching the harsh outpost lighting and transforming it into something almost magical. For a moment, he wondered if isolation had finally broken his mind. "How do you know my name?" he managed, his voice rough from disuse. Lyra's head tilted at an angle that seemed both curious and bird-like. "The one who spares life leaves echoes. These echoes have names." She stepped fully into the outpost, her movements fluid and deliberate. "Your designation. Your actions. These traveled across the division you call DMZ." Sarah chimed in, unhelpfully. "Unauthorized alien presence detected. Protocol requires immediate notification of Earth Command." "Override," Nikolai said quickly. "Authorization Volkov, 7-7, Epsilon." "Override accepted," Sarah replied, though the AI managed to sound disapproving. "However, I am obligated to note that harboring an alien visitor from a technically hostile species violates 14 separate regulations." Lyra's gaze moved around the cluttered outpost, past the stained walls, the flickering lights, the pile of ration containers Nikolai had been meaning to recycle. Rather than disgust, her expression betrayed only intense curiosity. "Your dwelling speaks of solitude," she observed. "A punishment for mercy?" Nikolai gestured to the least uncomfortable chair in the common area. "Something like that," he said. "Earth military doesn't appreciate officers who question orders. Especially when those orders involve weapons of mass destruction." She remained standing, seemingly fascinated by the chair itself rather than its function. "The settlement you spared, Harmony Confluence, is my birthplace. 317 souls continue their songs because of your choice." Her head tilted again. "I was selected to understand why. Why I didn't kill you all." Nikolai laughed bitterly. That's simple. I've seen enough death. I didn't want more blood on my hands. Lyra's filaments rippled in what might have been confusion. Blood, she repeated. Your metaphor for guilt. Interesting. She finally perched on the edge of the chair, her movements precise. My people believed your kind incapable of such restraint. Most days, I wonder the same thing, Nikolai admitted. The next morning found Lyra studying the outpost's broken atmospheric regulator with intense fascination. Before Nikolai could warn her about the temperamental machinery, she had removed a panel and was manipulating something inside with her six-fingered hands. I wouldn't touch that if I were, he began, then stopped as the machine hummed to life, air quality readings jumping to optimal levels for the first time in months. How did you do that? Lyra's filaments rippled in what he was beginning to recognize as pleasure. Your technology speaks a simple language. Crude, but earnest. She replaced the panel. It wished to function but was unable. I helped it remember its purpose. Over the following days, a routine developed. Lyra would explore the outpost, fixing systems that Nikolai had long given up on. He would watch, ask questions, and gradually share stories of Earth, of the war, of the choices that had led him to this lonely post on the edge of nothing. In turn, she taught him about Vespari culture, their harmonies, their connection to technology that seemed almost mystical. Their belief that all things, living or mechanical, possessed a resonance that could be understood and enhanced. Your people treat machines as tools, she explained one evening, her hands gently coaxing Sarah's malfunctioning environmental sensors back to life. We treat them as extensions of intention. The difference is significant. Is that why Vespari technology is so far beyond ours? Nikolai asked, watching as diagnostics that had been failing for months suddenly registered green across the board. Perhaps. Her filaments shifted in what he now recognized as contemplation. Or perhaps it is because we do not build our advancement upon the destruction of others. The statement should have felt accusatory, but her tone held only observation. Still, Nikolai looked away, the weight of Earth's colonial history, his own participation in it, heavy in the silence that followed. I'm sorry, he said finally. For all of it. For what we tried to do to your people. Lyra moved closer, her opalescent eyes shifting through colors he had no names for. One cannot apologize for the actions of many, she said. But one can change the future with a single choice. Her hand hovered near his face, not quite touching. You already have. The alarm came at dawn, a perimeter breach that sent Sarah into a frenzy of protocols. Nikolai limped to the console, his outdated prosthetic protesting the sudden movement. 3 Earth military shuttles on approach, Sarah announced. They are requesting immediate landing clearance. Nikolai's stomach dropped. How did they know? Automated systems still report to Earth Command, Sarah replied. Your override prevented active notification, but regular telemetry data would have revealed the presence of non-human life signs. Lyra appeared at his side, calm despite the flashing alerts. They have come for me. Probably, Nikolai agreed grimly. Earth military has been trying to get their hands on Vespari technology since first contact. A live specimen would be quite the prize. He turned to her, decision made before he fully realized it. You need to go. Now. Before they land. She studied him, those otherworldly eyes unblinking. And you? I'll stall them. Buy you time. He was already moving toward the weapons locker, technically sealed, but he'd found the override months ago. Just in case. That course leads to your death, Lyra stated, not as a warning but as a simple fact. Nikolai shrugged, retrieving an old pulse rifle. Better than watching them take you apart to see how you work. Her filaments rippled with emotion he couldn't read. There is another way. She moved to the communications array, her 6 fingers dancing across the controls with impossible speed. My vessel can accommodate 2. Before Nikolai could respond, the outpost trembled as the first shuttle touched down outside. Within minutes, the sound of armored boots echoed from the main airlock. "This is Commander Trent of Earth Special Operations," a voice boomed through the intercom. "We know you're harboring a Vespari national. Surrender the alien and all data collected, and your previous crimes may be overlooked." Nikolai positioned himself between the inner airlock door and Lyra. "Commander Trent," he replied, forcing calm into his voice, "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. I'm the only one here at Outpost Meridian." "Our sensors indicate otherwise," Trent's voice hardened. "We are authorized to use lethal force if necessary. You have 30 seconds to comply." Lyra placed a hand on Nikolai's shoulder. "It is complete," she said softly. "The choice is yours now." He turned to find her standing beside a swirling portal that had materialized in the center of the common area, a gateway that somehow linked directly to her ship without breaching the outpost walls. "What did you do?" he breathed. "Harmonized frequencies," she replied simply. "A doorway where distance folds upon itself." The airlock door began to glow red as cutting tools worked on the other side. They had seconds, not minutes. "I'm a deserter," Nikolai said, doubt suddenly flooding him. "A failed soldier. Why would you want me to come with you?" Lyra's filaments vibrated with intensity. "Because you chose life when death was easier. Because you hear the music beneath the machinery. Because," she touched his face with gentle fingers, "your resonance harmonizes with mine in ways I cannot yet explain." The airlock sparked as the cutting torch broke through. "Captain Volkov," Sarah's voice cut through the chaos, using his old rank for the first time since his demotion. "If I might make a suggestion, go." Nikolai looked back at the AI interface, surprised. "I calculate a 97% probability of your execution if you remain," Sarah continued, something almost human in the synthesized voice. "And I would find that outcome unsatisfactory." The airlock door crashed open. Armored figures poured through, weapons raised. "Thank you, Sarah," Nikolai whispered, then turned and stepped through the portal with Lyra. The sensation was indescribable, like being unmade and remade in the space between heartbeats. When reality solidified again, they stood in the cockpit of Lyra's vessel, its walls shifting with the same liquid mercury quality he'd observed from outside. Through the view screen, he watched as soldiers swarmed the outpost. Their shouts of confusion as they found it empty gave way to fury as the structure's systems began failing one by one, Sarah's final act of defiance. "They will pursue," Lyra said, her hands already activating the ship's controls. "Let them try," Nikolai replied, feeling more certain than he had in years. As the vessel rose, breaking free of Helix 9's gravity, Nikolai watched the copper sea and twin suns recede beneath them. For the first time since the war, the boundary between duty and conscience seemed clear. Lyra moved beside him, her resonance, as she would call it, a gentle presence at the edge of his awareness. "Where shall we go?" she asked. Nikolai thought of Earth, of military courts and rigid hierarchies. Of decisions made in distant offices that cost people their lives. Then he looked at Lyra, at the stars stretching endless before them, at possibilities he'd never dared imagine. "Somewhere new," he said. "Somewhere we can both begin again." The ship accelerated, its hull rippling as it prepared to jump beyond conventional space. In the final moments before transition, Lyra's hand found his, 6 fingers intertwining with 5. "All journeys begin with a single choice," she said softly. As stars blurred into streaming light around them, Nikolai reflected that his choice, made in a moment of moral clarity midst the chaos of war, had led him not to punishment, but to possibilities. Not to isolation, but to connection. To Lyra, who had crossed boundaries of space and species to find the one soul that had recognized her people's right to exist. The vessel vanished into the depths of space, leaving behind only the echo of sacrifice, and the promise of what might grow in its wake.